Ambassador, again, thank you for your presence here this afternoon. A couple of things I want to add to what you've been asked. First of all, let me start with agriculture. And the challenge, I think, is that at least when it comes to soybeans and grain sorghum, China is such a significant purchaser, or has been historically, that it's hard to overcome that with other trade agreements on a bilateral basis. But where are the greatest opportunities for agriculture if you were taking a trade mission and you're a farmer or farm group in Kansas, I mean, India is one that comes to mind, particularly for grain sorghum, and yet it's such a difficult country to crack. What is your plan? How do you overcome and China complicates the need for agriculture producers in Kansas and across the country to be able to sell their commodities to China complicates the issues that you face in trying to get a trade agreement, a better trade agreement with China. Rare earth minerals is certainly a component of that, but in addition to that, in the United States, that purchase of those commodities is critical to the economy of many rural states.
We have to remember and keep in mind that China's economy is like a square and ours is like a circle, and they just don't fit together well all the time. And so we have to find a way to manage that trade. And I know that our farmers would love to just have free, unfettered access into every market in the world, and we're achieving that with a lot of markets, right? Right now, which is great. You know, with China, they have a different system. They're probably not going to change their entire system for us, but they know they benefit from having our soybeans. You know, I know they like to buy from Brazil, but they need our beans too. They need our sorghum. They need all of this, and so it makes sense to have purchase arrangements with them because it's a way to kind of have a square and a circle go together. So for sure we believe that. We also think that it's helpful to diversify, and that's why Vietnam has already reduced its tariffs for us on soybeans, and they can go a little lower on that. Cambodia's already reduced theirs. You mentioned India. I have a team over there right now as we speak in New Delhi working on this. There's resistance in India to certain row crops and other meats and products. They're, like you said, they're very difficult nut to crack. I agree with that 100%. But they've been quite forward-leaning. The type of offers they've been talking to us about have been the best we've ever received as a country. So I think that's a viable alternative market. And then we talk about there are biofuels. There are other countries that want biofuels that can be derived from soybeans. So we're trying to kind of touch every base in every country to make sure we can be diversified. And of course, we want to maintain that relationship with China. They need our product and we want to sell it.
You touched on one of my points that was going to be is that biofuels is another component of how we can export agriculture commodities. And it has the advantage of having some processing jobs created by the creation of biofuels. I'd also highlight, I chair a caucus in the Senate on SAF, sustainable aviation fuel, another opportunity within the biofuels realm. What's the prognosis on ethanol and other biofuels, soy diesel and others in the global economy as far as trade?
Well, certainly with ethanol, that's been an area of broad market access. We have a huge new quota that we've obtained in the United Kingdom. We have a lot of other countries who, during our negotiations, have agreed to open their markets for U.S. ethanol. So that's a big win. With SAF, we have the European Union that has agreed to a commitment to buy $750 billion in U.S. energy products over the next few years. That includes oil and gas, but also anything else like biofuel or SAF. So there are, and that's a major market, obviously.
This is certainly outside USTR, but the photo that's behind me came from a number of years ago when I was in Kensington, Kansas, and driving down a street called Railroad Avenue, which normally in small towns lend itself to going by the grain elevator. I could hardly see the grain elevator because of the grain sorghum that is piled on the ground because there's no space in the elevator. This was and is now returned to be the circumstance in communities across Kansas. And so it highlights the magnitude of what we have to sell and how important your job is. Again, the part that is outside your realm, but as an advocate for farmers that you are, I would highlight the importance of food aid programs. USDA has those, Food for Peace, McGovern-Dole, legislation that Senator Hoeven and I are involved in, bring that program into the Department of Agriculture from USAID and the State Department. We're trying to find the right place in this administration in which feeding hungry people around the globe has a future. And I would encourage you to advocate as you have conversations with the Department of Agriculture or the State Department that there is more that can be done outside of trade agreements than is being done in feeding people who are hungry and or starving. And I think the last number I knew that our feeding hungry people globally represented about 13% of the market of commodities in the United States. 13% in today's world is not an inconsequential figure. And all I'm asking of you is that in your discussions within the administration, would you please highlight the opportunity that can be made outside USTR as far as what is a market for agriculture commodities grown in the United States, and it has the additional moral component of feeding people who are hungry.
I will do that, and I'll try to be even more concrete and have my staff talk to yours to make sure that there's an actual concrete path forward on this, right?
That'd be very useful. Let me see. I thank you for, you told me you would do something and you did it time and time again. And it is easy to talk about soybeans, but I want to make sure that grain sorghum was included. And watching your press release and your press comments in Southeast Asia, you were there to highlight the importance of grain sorghum. And then, in addition to an agricultural state, we got a number of things, how we earn a living in Kansas, but one of the significant ones is aviation. And you have, in your negotiations in the past with the United Kingdom, with South Korea, Japan, the European Union, you've established the 0 for 0 tariffs that was created in a 1979 agreement. You've continued that practice, that policy, and I want to encourage that to continue as you negotiate with India or Brazil or Singapore. Can you provide me an update and your thought process on the continuation of the 1979 agreement? Again, I would highlight that aerospace is one of the, perhaps the best, but one of the best in which we have the ability to export a lot more than we import. And the parts and relationships that we have, particularly under USMCA with Canada and Mexico in aviation, remain hugely important.
Yes, as you know, I lived in Wichita, their capital, so this is a sector that's important to me. And as we've gone through and we've accomplished our trade deals with countries, this is an area where we've agreed to give them, no reciprocal tariff. Again, recognizing the 1979 agreement and this status of the industry in America as a net exporter. With Brazil, India, Singapore, we don't have deals yet with these countries. With India, it's fairly far advanced. In my expectation, we can certainly talk about extending treatment to those countries as well if they're willing to play ball and come to the table and give the United States the market access it should have.
If something's renegotiated with in regard to USMCA, it would be a trade agreement subject to Senate ratification?
I think if you're changing U.S. law, yes. I mean, if I'm just having unilateral concessions from other countries, there's nothing for Congress to do on that front. But if there's something where we have to come to Congress to have you vote on it, that's what we have to do to make it happen.
And let me turn to the subject of this hearing, USTR's budget request. Your budget request in FY26, we had a difficult time in the budgetary process, the appropriations process, because the administration was new and getting its budget together. And that request was for $95 million. That's $15 million above what we marked our bill to be at $80 million. But it's still the largest increase. As you said, you've been flatlined. So this subcommittee and the full committee have, in terms of the history, have significantly increased the amount of money available at USTR. I wanted to give you the opportunity to explain to this subcommittee why that request is appropriate and what the money is important for.
Certainly, it's really, and again, as I mentioned, I don't do grants, I don't do loans, et cetera. It's really salaries, travel, expenses, and it's split into two buckets. We have our normal, operating budget, and then we have something called the Trade Enforcement Trust Fund that Congress created in 2015 to signify the importance of enforcement. And so, for example, when it comes to just critical staffing for tariff and trade exports, we need an additional 10 full-time employees to help do this, and we estimate that to be just over $5 million. When it comes to enforcement staff, because we're going around the world getting all kinds of great concessions for our manufacturers, for our agriculture producers and our workers and our service providers, but we have to enforce it. We have to monitor and make sure it's accomplished. So we need 9 additional employees there, and that's about $6 million. And then the trust fund itself, we'd asked for an additional $8 million too. Right, we're dealing with China, second largest market in the world. I've been hearing for years and years during my time in the trade field that we have to enforce, and that means we actually have to have people who monitor the situation, who work with folks on the ground, and then who can take action. And we have to do all this research, and we have to draft the actions, we have to take the actions, we have to execute. It's policy experts, it's attorneys, it's industry folks. And again, these are career folks. I'm not asking for more political slots. These are career people who know the trade, who know what they're doing. And it's been flat for 5 years, and we've never been busier. I'm negotiating with dozens and dozens of countries. We're trying to enforce these agreements we've made to protect American supply chains as we enter into a period of geopolitical uncertainty. And we have to have these supply chains. To many senators' points, we have to have tariffs, and I know people, disagree on how they're deployed, but I think I've heard, today that we have to have them in some way, and I have to have people to do it, so I can do it strategically, so I can do it in a nuanced way.
I myself, over the years, have said we have trade agreements that seem to be good when we approve them, but they have to be enforced. And so that point resonates with me. And you have, assuming that confirmation occurs as expected here in the next few days, you'll have a chief ag negotiator on board. You have instructions for her day one that she's going to accomplish and solve.
I do, and fortunately, she's a longtime career staffer who knows the business, knows the community, knows the countries, and she's already been hard at work. She'll of course have added authority when she's confirmed. One of the things I've asked them to look at is what about Brazil, right? I've heard a lot about Brazil today and who they are as a trading partner, but we have to remember in terms of ag, they're a competitor. And not just ag, aerospace, all kinds of things. They are a competitor. And every time someone retaliates against us, Brazil tends to do the backfill. So there are a lot of things to solve here. And our ag negotiator, she's ready for the job.